The world does not need more fast-track breathwork facilitators. Let me start by saying this clearly because it matters more than anything that I could say. If you're watching this, you are not here by accident and you are not just curious or simply exploring your options. And you definitely are not here because you need another certification to add to a list of things you've already done. You're here because something inside you already knows that the breathwork industry is changing and it needs different people to lead what comes next. People who are willing to hold responsibility rather than chase recognition. People who feel the weight of this work in their body and aren't trying to escape it. People like you. And before I go any further, I want to name something that most people in this industry are too afraid to say out loud. The breathwork space didn't grow too fast. It grew too shallow. And if you've been around long enough, you already know this, even if you've never put words to it. Breathwork was never meant to be a performance. It was never meant to be a peak experience factory, and it was never meant to be handed in a few intense days and called mastery, yet that is exactly where the industry went. Around 2020, breathwork moved from the edges into the mainstream, and at first it felt like liberation. People were finally feeling again, bodies were opening, emotions were moving, truth was surfacing in a world that had been numb for a long time. But underneath that expansion, something else quietly fractured. People were being personally transformed and then immediately positioned as facilitators, certified quickly, celebrated loudly, and released into the world without the depth, containment, or internal stability required to hold others through what this work actually opens. Intensity became confused with readiness, catharsis became confused with competence, and people paid for it, not just emotionally, but somatically, psychologically, and spiritually. Clients left sessions cracked wide open, but not anchored. Facilitators burned out while trying to hold too much without support. Boundaries collapsed, and breath, something ancient and intelligent, became a tool applied without context. And this is where School of Orygen begins. Not as a reaction, not as a rebellion, but as a recalibration, because breath alone is not enough. Without context, breath can resurface trauma without resolution. Without integration, it can fracture identity instead of stabilizing it. And without ethical leadership, it can create dependency rather than sovereignty. And the truth is, many facilitators were never taught integration themselves, not because they failed and not because they weren't capable, but because the space that they trained in never provided it. I didn't create Orygen breathwork because the world needs more breathwork facilitators. The world needs fewer facilitators in actual fact, who are underprepared and more who are embodied, educated, and internally resourced. Orygen breathwork was built from lived experience inside large containers, long-term spaces, and real human aftermath, from witnessing what happens when nervous systems are opened without a pathway home. This training does not treat breath as the solution. It treats breath as one instrument inside an entire human ecosystem. Here we work with neurology, neuroscience, biology, trauma awareness, somatic intelligence, belief systems, identity architecture, and energetic field dynamics, not as separate disciplines, but as one integrated system, because transformation does not complete at the moment of release. It completes when identity stabilizes. At School of Orygen, we don't train people to perform breathwork or any of the other training modalities. We train people to become the kind of presence others instinctively trust. And that begins with identity, not branding, not confidence techniques, not borrowed authority, but the internal self-concept from which you hold space. Because how you see yourself determines everything: your boundaries, your authority, your capacity to lead without fixing, your ability to hold intensity without becoming responsible for it. This is where most training stops short and where Orygen breathwork goes deeper. We don't keep people in healing loops, and we don't position facilitators as saviors, and we don't create dependency. We teach practitioners how to guide people out of survival, out of story, and back into self-leadership, because the goal is not lifelong clients. The goal is sovereign humans who no longer need you because they found themselves. That is real mastery. And I want to share something with you because there was a moment when I realized something that stopped me cold, dead in my tracks. I was standing in a space of about 150 people where everyone was opening fast, breathing deeply, and releasing visibly. And from the outside, it looked powerful. It looked like transformation, but inside my body, something wasn't celebrating. I could feel it so deep in my bones, not as fear and not as judgment, but as responsibility. I started noticing what happened after the sessions, people leaving, and they were so open but not anchored, and facilitators were glowing from intensity but quietly depleted. Questions no one was asking because the room had already moved on to the next breakthrough, the next event. And I remember thinking, we're opening doors faster than we know how to close them. Who's holding these people? That was the moment that the illusion broke for me, because I realized the problem wasn't bad intentions, it wasn't a lack of passion, and it wasn't even a lack of skill, it was a lack of containment. The industry had confused personal transformation with professional readiness, and suddenly it was obvious breathwork didn't need more hype, it needed maturity. It needed facilitators who understood what it actually means to be responsible for another human's nervous system, not just during the breath, but after it, around it, because of it. That was the moment School of Orygen became inevitable, not as an idea, but as a responsibility I could no longer ignore, because once you see what's missing, you don't get to pretend you didn't see it. Now, before I go any further, I want you to pause with me just for a moment, not mentally, not conceptually, but in the body, because this work doesn't begin with information, it begins with capacity. So wherever you are right now, let your shoulders soften and let your jaw unclench and take one slow breath in through your nose. Not to change anything, just to notice and let it go. And take another breath, slower this time, and feel where your body naturally settles when it's not trying to be anything. Notice what's here, not excitement, not urgency, just truth. Because the next part isn't about whether you want this work, it's about whether your nervous system is willing to hold the responsibility that comes with it. And this is where a choice is made. Up until now, you've just been listening, but this next part requires radical honesty and truth. So you have two options. You can continue engaging with breathwork the way the industry currently allows, fast certifications, borrowed confidence, intensity without integration, and there's nothing wrong with that path. It's just not this one. Or you can choose to be a part of the group that helps rewrite the standard, the group that says we're not willing to open what we can't responsibly hold, a group that understands authority. It doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being stable, the group that's willing to slow down, be refined, be observed and held to account because the work deserves that level of care. This is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being willing to take responsibility. And here's the truth most trainings will never say. If you're not willing to be assessed, if you're not willing to be reflected, if you're not willing to strengthen your own nervous system before holding others, then you are not ready for this level of work. And that doesn't make you wrong. It just means this isn't your moment just yet. But if something in your body just steadied when I said that, if you felt clarity instead of defensiveness, if you felt relief rather than pressure, that's not ego, that's recognition. Because the people who belong here, they're not chasing permission, they're choosing that responsibility. And the life this training prepares you for isn't flashy, it's steady. Orygen breathwork facilitators don't hustle for clients. They don't perform healing to be seen, and they don't burn out trying to prove legitimacy. They choose how and when they work. They design containers that honor their nervous system and their life. They hold space without depletion, and their presence creates this ripple effect, not because it's loud, but because it's trustworthy. This training is immersive, weekly, and paced for integration rather than overwhelm. Graduation is not based on attendance. It's based on embodiment, observed facilitation, ethical discernment, demonstrated nervous system stability, and the ability to know when to guide, when to pause, and when to do nothing, because The most dangerous facilitator is not the unskilled one, it's the one who doesn't know their limits. Orygen breathwork also does not bypass the shadow of this industry. We address spiritual ego, competition disguised as consciousness, intensity mistaken for enlightenment, and facilitators here and trained as stewards, not performers. People who protect the integrity of the work and understand that real leadership is quiet and stabilizes the room without effort. This is not hierarchy, it's responsibility. And now I want to be very, very clear with you. I'm not here to persuade you to apply. I'm not here to convince you that this training is valuable. And I'm not here to create urgency around something that is meant to be entered calmly. This work does not respond to pressure, it responds to readiness. School of Orygen is not something you chase, it's something you step into when life has already met you there. If you are watching this and feeling grounded, not rushed, not activated, that matters more to me than your resume, your experience, or your confidence, because this training is not built for people who force outcomes. It's built for people who can hold them. We don't need more facilitators who are trying to prove something. We need facilitators who are already resourced enough to let the work move through them without attachment. People who don't need to be seen and therefore can truly see others for who they are. Applying for Orygen breathwork is not a request for approval. It is a declaration that you are willing to be met clearly, honestly, and without performance. And the application will not ask you to sell yourself. It will ask you to tell the truth about your capacity, about your edges, about your readiness to be refined rather than praised. If you feel steady right now, if nothing in you feels like it needs to rush or prove, that's your signal. You don't need to manage your outcomes. If this work is truly aligned, it will open for you without force. And if it's not, nothing is lost. Either way, trust that life will meet you exactly where you are. Because the future of breathwork does not belong to those who are loud. It belongs to those who are steady and grounded. And when you're ready, you may step forward. This is your invitation.